Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this latest IMRG LinkedIn Live. I'm Andy Mulcahy. I'm Strategy and Insight Director at IMRG. We're the trade body for online retail in the UK. So we have several hundred retailers who give us some sales figures, and we measure their performance and look at all sorts of stuff across their websites. What we do in these sessions is we take a topic and then we try and nail it in 15 minutes, which is impossible, but there you go. And the topic for today's is the checkout and the future of the checkout, where it's all going. So we're coming up to peak, obviously, so we'll have a little bit of a chat about that. But I guess you can't really make loads of changes just for peak to your checkout. It's kind of a longer term thing, really, and it remains one of those areas that's sort of frustratingly high with the amount of abandonment and stuff that it gets there. But what we're going to do is bring in Matt from Locate. They've done a little bit of research recently into this area, so we'll be hearing from about that. So Matt, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Good to be here this afternoon. I'm Matt Furneaux with Locate. I'm the commercial director. I've worked in the location technology space for about 20-something years. Locate do clever things with location data to help organizations reach and to form close relationships with their customers. You probably come across us most as that clever little bit of tech that sits at the checkout that lets you enter your address using any combination of letters and numbers, and it magically finds it and saves you loads of time, and you get a better experience. So that's what we do.
Yeah, we're neutral at IMRG, but to be fair, that is quite useful, isn't it? That stuff. I'll just put that one out there. So we've had this massive change in this pandemic thing, and we kind of know what it did to online, but I'm just interested to hear what it did for you, if you like. What's your assessment of the impact that it's had?
Yeah, huge question, isn't it? And we've probably been forming that opinion over the last 18 months or so. We've recently commissioned and completed a piece of research around the future of the digital checkout, and that delved a little bit into sort of shoppers' reliance upon e-commerce as well. So whilst we kind of sensed that the high watermark was higher than it was pre-pandemic in terms of shoppers online, our research found, I think we spoke to 4,500 consumers across the UK, Europe, and North America. 72% said they had a greater reliance on e-commerce than they did pre-pandemic, and there's all sorts of reasons for that behind that number. We've got people that are shopping online for the first time and stayed. You've got a whole slew of brands that left the high street altogether. You think about Debenhams and Arcadia and Monsoon and Jaeger and others that stopped trading on the high street and went online. So if you want to choose those brands, you're going to have to be shopping online. So there's kind of a whole load of moving parts, and then some brands that just elected just to shut up shop on the high street and go online. Think about the Gap in the UK, made that decision a couple of years ago. So for reasons of choice and convenience, possibly an element of kind of health and safety, I think that figure of 72% with a greater reliance is perhaps not too surprising.
Yeah, and with your research, was there anything? Were there any sort of major differences between what the UK thinks and what US think, or Europe, or whatever?
I think in terms of sentiment, no, not a huge divergence. Some of the themes were pretty common. How retailers have responded and some of the choices that they've given shoppers look a little bit different. There's a lot more what they call BOPIS in the US, so buy online, pick up in store. That seems to have more of a commonality in the US, but otherwise we see a lot of similarities between shoppers on both sides of the Atlantic.
Yeah, and what do they give us the main reasons then for cart abandonment? Because like I was saying, it's still this thing that seems frustratingly high. It's gone up and down a little bit in the 11 years I've been working in e-commerce, but it still remains quite high.
It does, and we dug in quite a lot into cart abandonment in this survey. I think one of the things that is evident is that it's quite a nuanced topic. There's more to it than just if you don't complete a purchase that is an abandoned purchase, because plenty of us leave items in the basket. Maybe we come back at a later time, a more convenient place or device to complete a purchase. So it's not just all about not completing it there and then. But when we looked at the reasons that people gave for an abandoned transaction, the highest, 59%, said it was because of kind of unseen or unexpected costs right at the checkout, whether that's shipping costs or other costs. 59% said that was a reason why they were just going to give up and not complete that transaction. 37% said it was the insistence on creating an account. I hate that. I don't know about you, Andy, but if you have to create an account, or it appears that you have to create an account, that really affects almost 40% of shoppers. I think sort of coming up in third place, almost 30% of shoppers said it was just the time it took to enter checkout information. And the address is a key one, and that's what we think about, because it often requires so many fields to be completed. if you make someone type in an address in full. And you think, if I'm buying something for a friend or a relative in a different country, I don't even know how addresses are structured in, well, I probably do actually, but most of us wouldn't know how an address would be structured outside of where we live. So that was a real offender, just making it hard when there were ways in which you could improve the sort of the ease and the convenience and the speed of the checkout. So there was 8 or 9 that we identified in the research, but they were the top 3 that really kind of seemed to wind up consumers and will lead to them just giving up and not completing.
Yeah, and to be honest, they've been the same for quite a long time. Actually, it hasn't really evolved a lot. That surprise you got to pay £3 thing is actually still the thing that really annoys people. It always has. But what about the sort of options, if you like, or the structure of the checkout? What do they kind of expect to see there?
Again, we've seen something emerge. It's often been talked about. I think we've talked about it on some IMRG events. This kind of idea of good friction and bad friction. And sometimes we pooled all that into one and said, well, friction bad, make things absolutely slick and fast. And there's time and place where that's true. We've seen evidence that low value, high repeat purchases, we kind of want that single click, single swipe checkout. It's the sort of thing we might buy using Alexa or Google Home Assistant, because it requires no real emotional investment. And in those cases, that's great, zero friction. But our survey showed that it was 56% of those that we talked to, or the agency talked to, were actually quite happy with kind of good friction or appropriate friction. And some examples of that could be just things that elevate the shopping experience. If you've chosen to come online, or you haven't got the in-store experience option, then we've seen digital trying on services, or we've seen a number of beauty brands that are using kind of hyper personalization, using AI to make that purchasing journey more interesting and more engaging. So the use of technology in the case of sort of good friction, in making that purchasing experience more kind of rich and enjoyable, even if it slows it down, is something that shoppers say they're quite open to. But it absolutely completely pivots when it comes to the checkout. When I'm a sure thing, I've made my choice, I want to buy this thing. If you slow me down at that point, going back to what we said a minute ago, it could be that the kind of cards are all off the table. So I think retailers have got to really find that balance between where they introduce kind of interesting things to do and give those choices to shoppers. But then when it comes to checkout, making sure that the payments, payment options are the right ones. You're not asking them to fill in too many fields, like the address, and you're making that part of the process kind of easy, quick, and convenient. So I think that's an interesting area for retailers to be considering. Have they got that balance right between sort of the good friction and the bad friction that shoppers really don't want, and ultimately will lead to cart abandonment? But also we see in the survey that if you just introduce too much of the wrong friction, some shoppers are just saying, I'm not going to shop with you again. They will genuinely just take their purchasing power somewhere else. And that's kind of the worst possible outcome for retailers, right?
Yeah, and just to quantify how difficult it is, I suppose. So we do studies into this area, and what we always find is that a stronger combination of options is kind of positive at the checkout. So the point about friction is you just want people to go through nice and easy. But actually, the more sort of options you give them, sort of the better it is. But then that brings in friction. So you've got to navigate your way through that somehow. There's not really an easy answer, I'm afraid. But we're sort of strayed into technology a little bit there. What do you sort of sense people are looking to invest in?
Yeah, so the last question and this one flow quite naturally together. The use of technologies to try and deal with that kind of good friction, bad friction dichotomy, and technologies that will allow that more personal relationship between a retailer and its customer. I think particularly when there is an online and offline option. So if you've got multi-channels, using technology to ensure that the customer's experience is unified. And often, what are those kind of rooted foundational factors about who I am? Well, where I am, my address is a key one of those. It's not the only one, but having correct, accurate data about customers, it helps you to kind of have that golden thread between all those different times and places that consumers will interact with you if you've got multi-channel. But something that came out actually in our survey, we were asking about how sort of consumers are going to either sort of act differently, what their expectations are going to be into the future. And it's 31%, just check my notes, 31% of consumers said that in the future, they would expect to be able to have things delivered to them wherever they were within minutes, not necessarily hours or days. So that kind of opens up this whole area of dynamic delivery, dynamic location. And whilst some retailers have kind of cottoned on to this, the reality is probably most haven't at this stage. And we might think of the sort of the obvious candidates that I might buy to a dynamic location, like hot food to a park bench. That's an obvious example. But we're starting to see more things. Screwfix are now delivering within 30 minutes to locations. You've got Deliveroo delivering pharmacy prescriptions within short periods of time to dynamic locations. So that kind of senses within us a real trend that retailers are going to need to look at. Have they got the ability at the checkout to ensure that not just a dynamic location can be chosen for rapid delivery, but then you've also got some of the realities of, if you're using whatever payment service, you probably also need to have that person's billing address or some other form of physical address to link their identity to their payment service or their payment options. So there's going to be a little bit more going on at the checkout around dynamic location. And I think retailers are starting to think about how they can meet the needs of those demands.
It's not getting any easier, is it? Well, final sort of point then. We've got peak trading coming. What do you think? What's your expectations?
There you go. Is it coming or is it started? I think we've already started to see a bit of sort of heat and light across our platform. As just said at the outset, we serve about 20,000 customers worldwide, of which well over half of those are in direct retail e-commerce. So kind of on our address capture platform, we kind of see those highs and lows and spikes in real time. And we're starting to see it just start to build already. I just checked before I came on. I didn't know this anyway, but I think it's 52 days until Black Friday, 54 days until Cyber Monday. When does the peak kick in? Yeah, I think it started. And so why might that be? Well, I think there's probably two sides of anxiety, right? There's this shopper anxiety. Will the things that I want be available? And if I can see them now, I might just jump in and buy them. And we're starting to see some offers coming in to support that. And I think there's retailer anxiety. Will I have the inventory and will I be able to get it to my customers in time? So making offers that means they can start to meet some of those needs early enough. And something else that came through our research is just kind of that anxiety and that sentiment amongst shoppers that if they buy something too late and it's a gift, for instance, it just might not get where it needs to get to, certainly before the holidays. So my prediction is it started. I think we'll see a much more drawn out process. It won't spike as high as it did in 2020, but I think it's still going to be pretty impressive.
Yeah, and from anecdotally, every retailer I speak to says, "Yep, the Christmas searches have started like way earlier than they normally would." So, in a way, it might help to smooth out that. Remember the old problem back in the day? It was Black Friday was this thing that was concertinaed, and everything used to get happen there. So, I don't know, getting pulled out. There's swings and roundabouts in it. This retail game. There is,
and even last year, that actually for us, the spike actually came on the Saturday, not on the Friday or the Monday. So we've seen that sort of drawing out. Was it a week or 2 weeks? And now I think it's going to be much much longer. I think in reality, any changes to platforms are unlikely to happen now. Code freezes are coming in if they haven't already started. But I think what we also saw come through the research, I think something like 3/4 of retailers were already planning investments into their checkout to ensure they're meeting some of the things we talked about. Yeah, and things like auto-complete address capture is just a quick win, which demonstrably improves UX, increases conversion, and makes for a happier experience at the checkout.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thanks very much for joining us today, Matt, and I hope you took something from that. And good luck, really, for the future, everyone, over the next 2 months or so. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks, Andy.